Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice here at the International Coaching Federation. The term neurodiversity gained popularity in recent years, but was coined in 1998 by Judy Singer in her sociology honors thesis to promote equality and inclusion in neurological minorities. According to a study by Deloitte, somewhere between 10 and 20% of the global population is considered neurodivergent. And I can tell you, I am one of those 10 to 20%. The word neurodiversity is often used in the context of autism spectrum disorder, as well as other neurological and developmental conditions such as ADHD, Asperger's syndrome, dyslexia, epilepsy, anxiety, OCD, and Tourette syndrome. And before we dive into this really great conversation with our panelists, I want to just tap a little bit into what is neurodiversity inclusion. When we look at defining inclusion, it involves the deliberate and intentional acts that embrace diversity. So what acts can be done to embrace neurodiversity in coaching? Some of these acts could be providing accommodation for those with neurodiversity, such as testing accommodation and coaching accommodation. Also, adjusting communication style can be a way to be inclusive. And lastly, perhaps you can find inclusive methods to recruit neurodivergent clients and students. Today, I have a panel of esteemed professionals who will provide insight into neurodiversity and coaching. Panelists, please introduce yourself. We will start with Jeff Cooper.
My name is Jeff Copper. I'm a attention coach specializing in coaching adults with ADHD, residing from Tampa, Florida, and I'd like to thank ICF for putting this on and allowing me to be on the panel.
Thank you so much. Katrina.
Hi, I'm Katrina Henry. I'm here in California in the Los Angeles area. I am a licensed associate marriage and family therapist, and I also work as a corporate wellness consultant at United Healthcare.
Thank you, Katrina. And Dana.
Hello, I'm Dana Puklepovic. I'm based in Buenos Aires, Argentina. I'm an ontological and CIQ coach, and I'm also a mother of a child with a disability, and I lead programs for the inclusion of people with disabilities and neurodiversity in schools and in companies, and coaching parents of children with disabilities. So happy to be here and share and build knowledge together.
Thank you. And Elaine.
Hi, I'm Elaine Taylor Klaus with ImpactParents.com. I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia, and really feel like I live in cyberspace most of the time. We provide online coaching, training, and support to parents of what we like to call complex kids, kids with a whole wide range of neurodiversity. And what we've learned is that coaching as a modality is really a powerful way to empower kids, to empower their kids, to empower parents to empower their kids to become independent and autonomous. So really thrilled to be here today and really thrilled we're having this conversation.
So thank you. Thank you again to our esteemed panelists. So let's dive into this discussion. And before we do that, I see everyone across the world. Make sure you put where you're from. We want to see where you're from across the globe. So let's start with our first question discussion here. Let's speak about the stigma associated with neurodiversity in coaching. How can we change it? Jeff, what are your thoughts?
I want to just, the human brain is really interesting. I like to think of it as a two-level system. We have that automatic brain and we have the thinking brain. And our more primitive brain, when it doesn't understand something, it's foreign, it has a tendency to discriminate or push away and jump to conclusions. And so there's a natural reaction to judge things and create stigma as a result of it. And when it comes to neurodiversity, people just, they have this tendency just to jump in and jump to conclusions, stigmatize it, as opposed to pausing and actually studying and thinking about it for what it is. So there's a tendency just in general to stigmatize stuff that you don't understand, that doesn't really make some sense. And I think that I'm grateful for ICF in doing this, because one of the ways to move past that is through education and awareness, which is really what this is really all about. And so how do we overcome it? I think we're part of that journey right now here collectively, particularly all the people who are tuned in that are curious about this. I like that because it signals to me that you want to learn and pass this on and get the word out. So again, I think this is a great forum.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. Katrina, what are your thoughts?
Absolutely. I think, like Jeff said, it comes out of that lack of knowledge, lack of understanding. And then if you think about it, like Lakeisha stated earlier, it rose out of the autism spectrum movement. It's deals with people with ADHD, and a lot of those anxiety and those issues that stem from mental health issues. Now, we all know there is a big stigma around the mental health issues, so it kind of translates into those neurodiverse individuals who like you said, don't understand, they don't have the knowledge, they're unsure of how to approach. And so there's a stigma to not naturally just stay away from that, people who you don't understand or people you don't have a lot of knowledge about. And so you just kind of stick away from it. But like you said, continuing this conversation, having you all here today is the only way we can break that stigma and kind of keep the conversation going and gain that knowledge. So yeah,
Absolutely.
I agree with Jeff. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you talked about that stigma and being afraid. I remember not wanting to tell people I have anxiety, because it's like, what are people going to think? They're going to think you're crazy. They think you have something going on. So definitely understand those perspectives. And Elaine, what are your thoughts?
So I love what I'm hearing from Katrina and Jeff, and I want to kind of shift it to a slightly different direction, if I may. Yeah. So in coaching, we hold that everybody's creative, resourceful, and whole, that there's nothing broken that needs to be fixed. And when we step into the realm of neurodiversity, we still want to hold that. But in order to hold people with neurodiversity as whole and creative, that means we have to understand how their brain functions so that we can guide them to achieve the results they want in a way that works for them. So oftentimes the way that I see stigma show up is an assumption that if somebody says they're going to do something and they don't do it, that means that they didn't want to, or the motivation wasn't there, or they didn't really care, or, we can make up all kinds of things about why somebody doesn't follow through with something they commit to in a coaching engagement. And when we understand where the neurodiversity plays in, when we understand how someone makes decisions or how difficult it may be to follow through on what it is they actually want to do, then we can problem solve with them to figure out how to create a new solution for themselves, instead of just making the assumption that I believe some coaches do, that, well, they didn't follow through, so clearly that wasn't the priority or it wasn't important. When you're dealing with neurodiversity, we have to understand that it's not just the outcome we're looking for, but it's the process of getting to that outcome that becomes increasingly more important when somebody presents with neurodiversity. And that's a stigma. We'll talk probably more today about executive function, but we have to understand the way that people make decisions and take action toward those decisions in order to help them achieve their outcomes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And Dana?
Well, I think I like summarizing what my colleagues have said. Stigma comes from fear and from not knowing. There is a lack of information. And just like in coaching, just like in any other area, if we don't know about something, we fear it. And we think that being different is something that happens to somebody out there, not to us. And what happens to us is different. So we are involved. And as coaches, I want to shift a bit the conversation now as why we stigmatize in coaching. And our brains enter the flee or the freeze mode, but not the fight, because nobody wants to fight here. But we make assumptions like, for example, a neurodiverse person or individual or an individual within the autism spectrum cannot hold a coaching conversation because they have communication deficiencies or difficulties, or coaching cannot fix autism when there is nothing to fix, like Elaine just said. So what I'd like to highlight here is that all these kind of assumptions put us away from being a possibility, and that is coaching is about. And on the other hand, it turns us into a barrier. So how can we become accessible and not being a barrier for so many people out there? first, I think we need to be honest with ourselves and acknowledge we are vulnerable. Nobody is expected to know, but we are expected to learn because there are so many people out there now that are neurodiverse. Then what I invite you now is to, when you meet someone who is neurodiverse, see the person, not their deficiency, not their difficulties. When we start seeing the person, we realize they have likes and dislikes like any of us, and they have dreams. And coaching is a space that can help them achieve those dreams and overcome the challenges that they have when they have to face this world that has been created for the homogeneous and the average person, not for a different one. No. So what else? We have, as coaches, we have a mental model of what a coaching conversation is or should be with a neurotypical person. So I invite you also to think about what can you do as coaches to accommodate, to adjust, to invite and be accessible for a neurodiverse client. Finally, and I end, stigma also falls upon the families of neurodiverse children. And they suffer a lot, this stigma, because they feel that they are not being good parenting skills, or they don't apply enough discipline to their kids. So something to have in mind there too.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I got some really good nuggets out of that. Listening to our panelists, we heard first, hey, we always sometimes think it's not about us. You know, it doesn't happen in my family. It doesn't happen in my coaching practice. Also, overcoming barriers, overcoming assumptions and stereotypes as well. And the big thing that I heard from every single one of our panelists was education and training, making sure that we know what neurodiversity is and how we can continue to educate ourselves. So I want to ask the panelists, what are some of the advantages of being educated and trained in neurodiversity? And I'll start with Dana.
Yes, well, I think there are a lot of advantages, but I would like to start with a very objective reason. And it's that around 20% or more people in the world, and this means 1.5 billion people, are neurodiverse nowadays. And this figure is increasing day by day because of diagnosis. So we are interacting with more and more neurodiverse people at schools, in the club, in the workplace. And even if you are not a coach into diversity and inclusion, you will be starting in having those type of conversations, because these interactions are the seeds for coaching conversations. So a coach that is educated in this area will have more tools, will be better prepared to deal with this type of situations in the coaching conversations. Let's say, for example, that you are an executive coach and that your client is a neurotypical client. However, in their team, there is a neurodiverse member of the team, and they come with this, your client brings in this issue or a conflict with this person, because the real thing is that when they start interacting, people find it difficult, have hard times communicating with a neurodiverse if you don't know how to do it. So a coach that is trained, that knows about these profiles, will have more tools to inquire, to challenge the client, to think beyond the traditional way of thinking. Or if you have a client who has dyslexia, and I think that many of us as coaches may have a client with dyslexia, you understand how the dyslexic brain works. For example, I learned that with my clients with dyslexia, I try not to use analogies or comparisons of metaphors because words don't come easy to them. So these are the type of accommodations that we can do and the advantages that it brings. If you are a career coach, you can also, by knowing the talents of the neurodiverse people, you can help them tap into those talents and bring them to the table. So they are like Maya Angelou, I always say, like Maya Angelou said, if we always do or think in the normal way, we will never know how amazing we are. So it's it's a challenge for us, but it's a good one. So
thank you, Dana. And Elaine, what are some of the advantages? I know you actually do a lot of education and training. So what are some of the advantages of educating and training people in neurodiversity?
I do, and it's interesting because I do educate professionals, but I also educate parents in the realm in terms of supporting their kids. And I'm just listening to what Dana was saying, and there a few things come up. The statistic that it's actually probably at this point more than 20%. Recent CDC statistics show that over 41% have been identified with symptoms of just depression or anxiety alone. So we're dealing with a significant portion of the population worldwide when we're talking about neurodiversity. And when people struggle with whether it's ADHD or anxiety or depression, all of those challenges neurologically impact our executive function, the frontal lobe of our brain. They impact the way that we think and process information, and the way that we make decisions, and the way we take action and follow through on those decisions. And so when we become educated as coaches in this arena and understand neurodiversity at a foundational level, and it doesn't have to be deep, but to really understand the role of executive function and the role that neurodiversity plays in decision making, that allows us a couple of things. It allows us to meet people where they are and invite them to grow from there, which is, a foundational principle of coaching. Is like, who are they? Where are you now? Where do you want to go? So it allows us to meet them where they are in their own brain, if you will. It allows us to play to their strengths. On the call today is David Gwerk with Adhd Coach Academy, and I took a class with him probably a dozen years ago. And one of the things I learned then about the foundational principle of ADHD coaching was you play to their strengths and you outsource the challenges. And when you're dealing with people with neurodiversity, that capacity to really dig into what people do well and to learn how to outsource or accommodate or find workarounds for what we don't do so well can be really powerful. And I identify as a neurodiverse adult. There are things I do really well. One of the very first things when I was diagnosed was I hired a bookkeeper, because there are things I don't do so well, right? So playing to our strengths and outsourcing our challenges is a really powerful tool that we can understand better as coaches when we're educated in this. And then the flip side of this is that it also allows us to avoid doing harm. Because sometimes as a coach, as kind of what I was alluding to earlier with the stigma, if we have an expectation of how a client's going to perform and they don't, people who struggle with neurodiversity have been disappointing the world their whole lives. We tend to make more mistakes than others. We've had a lot of negative reinforcement in our lives. And so when we come into a coaching relationship, and once again, we're not doing what we thought we were going to do, and if a coach isn't well informed, that can reinforce negative self-esteem instead of allowing us to see where our strengths are and find the workarounds. So that understanding of how the brain works and how we process information becomes essential to help us cultivate a sense of ownership in ourselves and our capacity, instead of another opportunity where we just have that tendency to just fail once again.
Thank you. And I wrote down what you said: play to strength, outsource challenges. That is a really good nugget that hopefully everyone wrote down. So whether you're neurodivergent like myself and Elaine or not, it's still a good coaching tip. Play to your strengths, outsource challenges. Thank you. And Katrina, what are some of the advantages of being educated and trained in neurodiversity?
Yeah, well, I think the big advantage is just being educated. There's never a disadvantage of getting educated, right? But the thing as coaches, I'm a therapist, but as coaches, as a therapist, we are in the service of people. So anything that deals with people, there's advantage of it, learning more about it. And it also widens your perspective, because although you may not be considered neurodiverse, if you're understanding the way someone who is neurodiverse thinks, it may broaden the way that you think as well. And also, when you think about working with that community, I'm going to say this a lot, is working in the scope of your competence, never working out of the scope of your competence. So being educated and trained, it just broadens that your area of your competence. But on the flip side of that is understanding that just because you get educated or you go to a training or a class does not mean that you're competent enough to work with this for someone who is neurodiverse. So also being able to recognize, so it may be okay, I'm not competent enough to work with this. I've been to a training, but I can recognize when I'm working with someone who's neurodiverse, or I can recognize when I need to outsource, like Elaine was saying. So being able to recognize, even if you're not able to just work with that person one-on-one because you have gone to a training, but you still don't feel competent, you can recognize that there is a new neurodiverse person that you're working with, and there's a need to outsource, there's a need to collaborate with others. So having that education and training will broaden your scope of practice, but it also broadens the way you think and handle situations as well.
Thank you so much, Katrina. Definitely work within your scope. It's really important. And Jeff, what are your thoughts about training and education in this field?
So I think as a coach, to embrace this is a huge opportunity. Some of the brightest minds of all time were neurodiverse. And to work with somebody that's neurodiverse, and number one, I've learned so much about myself through neurodiversity and really trying to understand somebody. And it taxes your coaching skills. I'm a much better coach now because it's really opened my mind. And at times it's a little bit unpleasant, but I'm a much better coach. I'm a much better person. And the thing that I want to employ upon the people that are there, whether you're comfortable and you need to bring somebody else in, or you're in this stuff, there is nothing I've ever experienced in my life when I'm sitting with somebody and my mind is opening and I truly am trying to get somebody, and you can tell that they feel understood for the first time and they begin to open up, and it's transformational, and you see this asset begin to blossom. I mean, what I'm describing is a very self-centered type thing, but because it's incredible when you're that first person, whoever got them before, and is helping them figure out their way through life and navigating. Again, it's transformational, at least for me and that individual. In addition to that, not embracing this crowd there's a huge societal cost that's associated with that. That is, it's hidden all over the place. And if you can help unlock that and help people advocate, it's an incredible experience, and everybody on this call and everybody who might listen to has that opportunity to get the education, to move these people along. And again, it's a very fulfilling thing to embrace it yourself, and you can help those for others. So it's a little bit more of a passionate response, but it can be so much fun, and it can be so fulfilling to the coaches out there who get involved to try to help these people or direct them.
Absolutely. And Jeff, we all have the passion for this. So we appreciate the passion that you bring to this as well. And so let's talk about, if you are a coach and you encounter someone who you believe is neurodiverse. So what are your thoughts about what a coach should do if they ever encounter someone who they're not sure, but they suspect or believe is neurodiverse? Elaine, what are your thoughts? Oh, you're muted, Elaine.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
I have so many thoughts. I think neurodiversity is going to become, in the future, we will find it's a core competency of coaching, understanding complexity of neurodiversity. And that doesn't mean everybody has to be trained to coach in this realm. But as Jeff said, there's this huge opportunity. And there are so many people that we encounter that have all kinds of different kinds of neurodiversity that we can really empower. The things that come up to me about what do you do when you encounter someone, part of it depends on whether they're aware of their own neurodiversity or not, right? So we're not going to be able to get into that depth of conversation today about how do you identify, but if somebody presents with and somebody shares their information is kind of the tack I'm going to start with. You might ask them how they've been successful in the past. You might ask them what works for them, really explore for them that playing to their strengths. When we see what's worked in one arena, it can help us map and figure out how to apply that in other arenas. The other thing is to really focus on inspiration and what's gotten them to this, sort of building on that, what's gotten them to wherever they are now. Because in order for someone to have arrived at your doorstep with some realm of neurodiversity, chances are they've overcome a lot already. and they have processes and skills and things in place for themselves that they need to learn to tap into, because they've gotten here. And so they've already hit some hurdles in their lives. So really helping them see what those are and play to those. And then the other thing I think is really important for us as coaches is to normalize it, is that we have this tendency to I often talk about the work that we do is talking about typical coaching for parents of kids who aren't so typical. And what we're doing is helping them see the ways in which their kids are typical, because neurodiversity is actually pretty pervasive and pretty common. So if we can normalize those differences as different and empowering and impactful and fabulous and not wrong, that is a grounding for a lot of clients to build on in whatever coaching arrangement they're in.
Thank you so much.
Jeff, what would you say?
Jeff, what are your thoughts?
First of all, if you're a coach and you haven't had a lot of experience with neurodiversity and you're there, get the education, get the awareness. That's kind of why you're here. I know some resources are going to be shared with you to get those things. If you're not comfortable, do the referral, get the education and learn, become a little bit more comfortable with it, experiment around with it a little bit. But when you're encountering them, to kind of echo what Elaine's saying a little bit differently, is mental faculty and cognition is on a continuum. And one of the things that, I think that most coaches, we coach the individual, we don't coach the diagnosis and stuff. And, to normalize it and make it look like, hey, everybody is slightly different. I know one of the things that I used back in the DSM-4 days, there was over 18,000 combinations of symptoms that could get you the diagnosis of ADHD. That doesn't take into consideration the severity or other comorbid conditions. And I would kind of clown around like, what version do you have? As if to say, this is a continuum, it's diverse. And to normalize it and say, hey, listen, everybody's got their thing, and kind of meet them where they are and work with them on their way through it. So if you're a coach and you're not comfortable, network, get some people that you are comfortable, you can make the referrals with, get the education. If you're curious about it, there's lots of training that you can do with it. Embrace it. Again, it's very fulfilling. If you are in the presence of them, again, normalize it. You're coaching the individual, not the diagnosis. They've got some talents. They're created naturally resourceful whole. Just open your mind just that much more. If they're not responding in a way that a typical client is, that's a challenge for you. You've got to get asked more curious questions. And I'll tell you, you'll learn a ton by just embracing that and taking it as an opportunity to improve your coaching skills and be more curious.
Absolutely. I love it. Embracing. And I wrote down that nugget. We coach the individual, not the diagnosis. Great point there. Thank you, Jeff. Dana, what are your thoughts? What do you do when you encounter someone who you believe is neurodiverse?
I'm in line with what first Elaine and then Jeff said. I think that we need to normalize this, but this is a process. And there are a lot of coaches who don't know about this. If you ask me 15 years ago, I had no idea whatsoever about this. And well, I learned, it took me years of being educated, learning, and trying to see how to implement this in coaching conversations. So following Jeff's advice, if someone is new in the field, or you feel that there are some patterns, or you identify a pattern in your client where you don't feel very comfortable, or you think that there is something is not working in the coaching plan that you have, I think it's a good idea to make a referral, following the ICF guidelines for referral. Have a kindly conversation with your client and tell them that what you have, the behavior identified by you, and make the referral. Also, I would advise, if it's an executive coaching that you have an agreement, I would first talk with a client before talking with a sponsor, because people with disabilities and people who are neurodiverse sometimes do not disclose their conditions in the workplace for fear of this stigma that we were talking some minutes ago. So I would recommend first to talk with your client. And finally, for the coach, I would recommend to speak about this with their supervisor, because it's good in the learning process to learn about us as coaches, to hear ourselves talking about what we felt when we met this person and how we felt, what were our emotions, and what are we going to do moving forward with this client also. So I think the supervision is very important for us in all the aspects of coaching, but here especially.
Thank you, Dana. And Katrina, you come from a different perspective as a mental health professional. So what are your thoughts about what coaches should do?
I'm thinking, when you encounter someone, there has to be, if you're thinking of this and you feel like they're neurodiverse, there's some level of rapport that has been built with this person. So I'm thinking you would, probe, ask more questions, and like Jeff said, meet them where they are, but also meet yourself where you are. Meet yourself, what understanding you have about where they are. Why do you feel that they're neurodiverse? What information, what questions, so you'll know what questions to ask. What's leading you to believe this way? And also, like we all say, collaborate and consult. Like that will be your best asset is to collaborate and consult, because when you probe and you get those answers and get those information and kind of figure out, okay, why do I feel this way? Why do I think this way? Why do I believe they're neurodiverse? What level of understanding do I have about their neurodiversity? Because like Jeff said, it's a spectrum. It's a continuum. So it could be anything that's, keeping you from maybe connecting with that client, from reaching those goals. So just kind of probing, asking those questions, and then kind of gaining that understanding for yourself. Is it something that I'm doing? Is it something that I can learn more? And again, my biggest thing is collaborating and consulting with others who may have a better understanding than you do. Because again, I'm going back to, you always want to be working within your scope of competence. So getting that understanding and consulting with others. Yeah.
Absolutely. Connect, collaborate. I hear a lot of that in this panel. And so that leads us to our final question to discuss. How can a qualified and competent, we highlight those two words, qualified and competent, mental health or other mental health care professionals be utilized as partners for coaches who are working in the neurodiversity space? So we're going to start with our qualified and competent mental health professional, Katrina, to give us some tips and information about this. Katrina, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I'm glad you highlight that qualified and competent, because just because they're a mental health professional does not mean they're qualified. You have mental health professionals that work with just families or just children or just couples. So when you're seeking out this assistance, qualified and competent are the key words you need to find. So finding someone who works with those patients with ADHD or autism or anxiety is going to be key when you're collaborating. And it's going to be very helpful because, like Jeff was saying, you guys work as a coach, you think about the person. And more on the mental health professional, we're working with the person, but we're also working through the lens of their diagnosis and kind of helping with them. So that partnership can be very powerful, not only for you as a coach, but for your client as well. So I think finding that qualified and competent and doing your research and not just be thinking, okay, they're a therapist or they work in a school system does not mean they're qualified to handle these neurodiverse populations. So kind of doing your interviewing, talking with, I had a great time. We were meeting with Jeff and Elaine and Dana because you guys all come from a different background from me, but that collaboration can be so powerful, not only for yourself gaining that knowledge, but for your clients as well.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Katrina, for bringing that lens to this panel, because we definitely needed that.
Absolutely.
Jeff, what are your thoughts?
Oh, wow. So I'm grateful to have been an ADHD coach for a fair period now and watching the ADHD coaching grow as an intervention. 10, 15 years ago, we were out there, we weren't really respected by the mental health community. And that's really not a fair statement. They just didn't know about us, right? But as we have come to work with them, I think a few things are happening. Number one, there's like 62% of mental health professionals are uncomfortable diagnosing and treating people with ADHD. I mean, think that's mental health professionals. So as a coach, we can help people, direct them to find the right care in the right situations. And so we're providing some services there. But at the same time, some mental health professionals, they're limited in their ability to educate consumers. And there's a lot of stuff that's out there and it's really, 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 really confusing. And to form a collaborative partnership is really coming together for a treatment team and working together in collaboration. And coaching, if you understand neurodiversity, you can really provide a lot of value to the mental health profession. I'm gonna give an obscure example, but understanding ADHD, which is my area of specialty, for my clients that take stimulants actually dehydrate you like coffee or alcohol, but they also suppress your appetite and your urge to drink. So to be able to work with somebody, particularly, somebody who's an athlete who doesn't realize that, and say, listen, water is medication. It's not really water. And if you begin to feel the urge to drink, you're spent, you're taxed out. To sit down and educate people, that's not the type of thing like a psychiatrist or a neurologist really has the time and stuff to do. And how does the consumer get that? So when you partner together to do that, it's an incredible bond that's taken place. And I got to give kudos to Elaine. She's done an enormous amount of work with mental health professionals, working as a liaison, bringing the parents into the equation. And the cool part is more and more, we're starting to see these partnerships form. And it's more of a holistic treatment. And coaches can really be a part of it. And the thing that's, I think, been most surprising to me as ADHD coaching has risen intervention is the role of education that we play in the process. Really helping reduce the confusion that's out there. That's such an asset. And more we're seeing, the mental health profession come to us looking for us to provide those services. So it's really a symbiotic relationship. And I'm happy to say that it's coming together. And I hate to say this, but I think the pandemic actually accelerated that process because both parties need each other as much as they needed one before. So it is important to provide that side. And then even I have relationships with specific people that I'll refer people to either for information resources or diagnosis if appropriate.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeff. Dana, what are your thoughts about the partnerships and collaboration?
I think that in inclusion processes, teamwork is the way to work because we can achieve more working together. What we can do as coaches, we can't do as mental health professionals. As long as Jeff said, the mental health professional is specialized, or Katrina said, is specialized in this field. Not all of them are specialized. I would also like to mention that we can partner with other professionals. For example, when I work with teachers and I coach teachers to make the education, inclusion in education, we work in teams with all the teachers, the special teacher, the tuition, the professor, the headmaster of the school, because they all need to learn about the inclusion, and coaching is a good space for that. And collaboration is the way to work there. The same with when I coach parents, I also work in collaboration with the therapist, whatever the therapist is of the child, no? Because for me, it's important to know at what stage of the therapy the child is, because the parents in general are very anxious about the results of their therapies, and they are like anxiety to have, maybe they have unreasonable expectations about the results of the therapies. And if we often make meetings where we make a down-to-earth plan for parents and work in something that is reasonable. And our coaching program works softly and flows, and the child has better results in their therapies. The same when I work in workplace inclusion, I work in teams with the occupational therapist who knows about specifically how to accommodate the job. And this can give me space to develop my coaching program. So I think that collaboration is the way to go in inclusion.
Thank you, Dana. And Elaine, I heard that you're already doing this kind of work. So talk to us about how can this be utilized and how can it be beneficial?
I'm just listening and trying to figure out how we bring this all together as we close this conversation and open up to questions. And yeah, I mean, like everybody else has said, we built Impact Parents on a platform of collaboration, and and that is foundational to the success of the people who are doing this work, because these kids, these adults, these humans require a multimodal approach to create the change that they want to create. And what we know about coaching is that it is an empowerment-based modality to create lasting change. And it's based on understanding and awareness and action. And sometimes that means going backwards in a therapeutic process and understanding what got us here, or understanding how our brain works. And sometimes it means understanding where we are now and what we want to get to and how to move forward. So there are a lot of different players that come into this mix to really be effective, to help people really achieve the outcomes that they want to achieve. We did this panel a couple of years ago at the International Conference on ADHD, and a group of us, of coaches and therapists, talked about what's the difference between coaching and therapy. And we did not come to a clear agreement on that. But what we all agreed on was how important it was that when you were dealing with someone with ADHD or with anxiety or with autism, that the specialists who work with them really understand how their brains were wired and how they operate. That the specialty area, this is what Katrina was speaking to, in that arena becomes all the more important. And as Jeff was saying, you know, as a coach, we're doing some education and some coaching, and then back to education and back to coaching. Coaching is about taking information and turning it into action, in implementing what we understand and know. And so in this arena, when you're dealing with neurodiversity, there's not a space for any one thing. It all kind of has to integrate with each other. So I just to see if I had notes, if there was anything else. I think that's really the bottom line of it, is that if we can understand how a person ticks and help them understand how they tick and how they operate and where their strengths are, and we can collaborate with the people who are providing medication, or the people who are providing education, or you know, doing the meditation, whatever it is, if we can work together as a team, as Jeff was saying, create that team and invite people to use their team and have that team communicate with each other, that's when we really set people up for the greatest success. And that's ultimately what we're about as coaches, is what is it going to take to get you from here to there? And I don't need to know as a coach, but I need to be able to help guide you to figure out who you need to, what you need to know, and who you need to work with to get to where you want to go.
Thank you so much. And again, thank you to our panelists. We will now open it up for questions. I will have Isabel see if there's any questions in the chat. And before we do that, I have been looking at the chat, and I wanted to speak about, as Jay Perry says, the elephant in the room and what ICF can do. This is just the start of what we're trying to do. And Katrina knows, she came to speak with us about mental health in the Black community, and I shared with her as well. It's not enough just to have a conversation. There has to be continuous action after that. So this is just one thing that I am doing, leading this charge in diversity as well, neurodiversity. I actually personally reached out to every single one of them, asking them to join me on this as well, speaking to Elaine and others who are doing this work as well. So I know in years past, we may not have seen as much accommodations, accessibility, acknowledgements in the neurodiversity community at ICF as we probably want. And now I'm definitely making that a priority for me. If any of you have had an opportunity to look at our new Member Belonging Index survey, there was a question about disabilities and neurodisabilities there. It's the first time that question's ever been asked in a survey. It is the first time we've acknowledged it. And I share with our panelists that when we were asking about potential member resource groups, that disabilities and neurodiversity was actually the second one that people would like to see happen as well. So just know this is just the start of it. And listening to the chat and listening to our panelists is what we need. In order for me to make change, I need to hear from you all. So Jay, thank you for bringing that up. And thank you to everyone who echoed his sentiments as well. And know that progress is happening. And just so you know, between Elaine and I've already asked her to help me to provide resources, training, and any other knowledge that we need in order to make this move with ICF. And anyone else that's interested in helping, please feel free to reach out as well. So I did want to make sure that we spoke to that before we dive into the question.
Lakeisha, I'm sorry, but that actually didn't address the question. The question is, how many neurodiverse people who want to be coaches can't get an ICF credential because the way the credentialing program is set up is not responsive to their needs?
Well, that's what we're trying to do. So I have to work with the credentialing team to get this information in order to make that happen.
Okay,
so
good.
I do, as Katrina said, I have to connect and I have to collaborate as well. I can get the ball rolling, I can get the conversation started, and I need to partner with my credentialing team in order to get the accommodations happening. And I will share with you, I did receive emails and I forwarded them over to my credentialing team, and they are working very diligently to work with me and partner with me to make this happen. So yes, I read the question and I wanted to make sure that you knew that it is a progress and it is a process that I am leading along with members of my team here within ICF as well. I would love to be able to do it myself, Jay. I just can't do it without members of my team who are also committed to this as well. Any other questions? Isabel, is there anything else in the chat?
First of all, thank you so much, Lakeisha. Thank you all panelists for this wonderful panel discussion. There were lots of comments. So I'm going to save the chat and share it with you, Lakeisha, because there may be some stuff in there that you want to, have a look at, after the session. Just want to make sure as well that you all know that Lakeisha will present on Monday, the 16th, as well on ICF's vision of diversity and inclusion. So I'm going to as well share this in the link. The resources are very long, so they will be uploaded together with the recording of the session directly in the events, and you will find it in your My Events section on the ICF platform. There are plenty of questions. I'm going to try and pick up one that is probably what patterns or characteristics would lead us to consider a client as neurodiverse? How would I know what to pay attention to? Is that something one of you could answer?
Well, I'll start because I alluded to it earlier in the conversation. I think that very often when you have a client who seems very present in the conversation, but really struggles with follow through, who may commit to something that they're very clear they want to do, but then struggle with figuring out how to get it to happen, or don't even know why it didn't happen. When there's this kind of disconnect between what you experience as their engagement and their interest and follow through, that may be a sign. It sounds like we're doing how do you know if somebody might be? What's a sign that somebody might have some neurodiversity? That's one of the signs I would look for.
So one of the things that I look for is just if I'm really listening to them, anything that is a bit odd, a little different. I'm actually proud of the fact that I probably had, probably 15 people who came to me with a diagnosis of ADHD and something occurred. Like, for example, one woman says, oh my God, I saw a picture of my kids in bunk beds and I never even remember having bunk beds in my house. That was a shock to me. As I began to ask questions, we together, sat down and started talking about the experience and actually had to write it out. She took it back to her doctor who diagnosed her and basically said, I got it wrong. It was auditory processing challenge. The point really is when you're listening and you hear something like that, get incredibly curious about it, not shut your mind down to it, and just kind of open your mind to kind of go that path. Because again, I'm sharing with you people that are coming to me with a neurodiverse diagnosis who, after working with them and listening to them, turns out they actually had some other type of diagnosis, or they had a comorbid condition that was missed that's significant. So again, for me, it's just listen to it and be curious. And if it doesn't fit the realm, don't discount it. Just say, hey, listen, I gotta open my mind up here and work with it.
The other thing you may hear is if self-deprecating comments from a client. I'm just not motivated. I'm a procrastinator. I must be lazy. There was a book years ago written in the ADHD space by a woman, and the title was something like, you mean I'm not lazy, crazy, or stupid? And so if we hear those kinds of self-deprecating comments, beating myself up for what I didn't do or how I tend to approach things, that may be another indication that there could be some neurodiversity on board.
I think also looking at like patterns, because I know I do a lot of as a therapist, I have to do a lot of probing of like what got you here, what brought you into therapy, listening to those patterns and those certain behaviors, and like Elaine said, the follow through. So not following through, but also following through when you're going through goals, but also what brought you to this point where you felt like you needed coaching or you needed therapy. So listening to their story and listening to their patterns can kind of be a good indicator, a telltale sign of just, like Jeff said, just listening to their conversation and kind of their journey.
Do we have more time for one more question, Lakeisha?
Yeah, we do one more question and then we'll have a last minute thought from each of our panelists to wrap up.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if it's a question, but I really want to read this out from Caddies. What if the kind of coaching that suits people who are neurodiverse is actually the gold standard of coaching? What if seeing Adhd Coaching as a specialty or specialist area of knowledge is the wrong way to look at it?
I love that. I think that's beautiful. We often say in the work that we do that, I work with parents of complex kids and it's teaching a coach approach to parenting. And that works for all kids. In fact, it's more effective for all kids, not just neurodiverse kids. And I suspect the same is very true in the realm of coaching, that when we meet the needs of everyone, when we are more inclusive as a coach, that elevates the level of coaching for all of us.
And that happens in every aspect of inclusion. Even if we think about being accessible in the architecture part, if we are accessible for someone who works on crutches, it's also good for a mother who has the baby chart, and the same. So as coaches, if we become accessible for neurodiverse, for disabled people, we are accessible for everyone. I think it's the way to the normalization that Katrina and Elaine were mentioning a minute ago. We need to normalize, but it's a process and it will take time, but we are on the journey already.
Thank you all so much. So let's hear the last minute thoughts from our panelists. Let's start with Dana. What's your last that you would like to give our viewers and attendees today?
Well, I think that first, telling them thank you for coming, because it's the first step to start learning and to start being familiar with this topic and with any topic in inclusion. The only way is to begin networking and learning from each other, and then start being more and more curious and challenge yourselves as coaches, what you can do out of your comfort zone of coaching. And you'll find different surprises, things that will surprise you, but you can do. And you can reach us whenever you want.
Always reach out to them. Connect with them on LinkedIn, connect with them via email. Absolutely. Elaine, what are your last thoughts or tips for the attendees today?
Well, I was going to say anybody, because I see a lot of questions and things in the chat. If you need help finding resources, connecting to others, I'm absolutely happy to field a volley of emails following this event to really guide people in an effective direction. So feel free to reach out to me at Impact Parents. And I think that the leading message I want to leave with is ask for help. Right? What we spend a lot of time training our parents to train their kids to do, like talking about the value of asking for help, looking for the resources that you need. We have this tendency to assume that we should know as humans. It's just part of that human condition. And when we can really understand what we do know and where we need some additional support, and learn to ask for it. And even as coaches, that means continuing to learn, continuing to grow, continuing to seek support. If you don't know, if you have a question, if you're not sure, ask for help. There's plenty of us out here in this arena who would be more than honored and happy to support you.
Absolutely. Resources everywhere. And Jeff, what are your closing thoughts and remarks?
I'm going to twist it. I got a charge for everybody. But first, a story to understand why. Years ago, I started Tension Talk Radio, which is a podcast that specializes in ADHD. And to my surprise, over the decade or so I've done that, the number of mental health professionals that listen to my podcast on it. In some interactions with several, and what I began to realize is they're mental health professionals, but they don't want to ask for help. They like the anonymity of going somewhere to find out for this in an open environment for them to gain understanding and ask intelligent questions. So with that experience, my charge to everybody here is I understand ICF is going to release this so that we can get it out to people. My charge is share this with the world so that people can go listen to this and from a place of anonymity that are curious so that they can get that conversation started and kind of get going, because at the end of the day, some people are reluctant to ask those questions. And the nice thing about the internet is something like this could be shared. People can, feel like a safe place and be validated by some of the things that we say, and then actually step up and move forward. So my charge to everybody is share this with everybody so we can continue what ICF started.
Absolutely. Definitely share. And Katrina.
Yeah, I just want to, Lakeisha, thank you for having me today. I feel like I'm getting more knowledge of the coaching as a mental health professional. And I have another charge for you guys. Like Jeff said, share, but also letting us not stop here. Like continue to get the training. I know Lakeisha has some great resources she's going to give you guys. Really get the training, continue to read, listen to Jeff's podcast, just get as much knowledge as you can. And I also want to close with the collaboration piece. I know as a mental health professional, you may have clients. I know we're talking about the difference between coaches and mental health professionals. Some people want to go to coaching and they just want to coach in my career. I want to coach with this issue, and they don't want to have to devil in like the past or kind of bring up other different things in their life. But I feel like collaborating with those. So maybe this part of their life, they just need a coach. Maybe this part of their life, they need a therapist. I think it'll be so powerful for you as coaches and also for your clients is that collaboration piece. I think that is so important. I collaborate all the time in my practice, whether it's with physicians or nutritionists or educators, just having like a team of people to work with your clients could be so powerful for them. So I want to invite you to do more collaborating in your practice. And again, thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. Again, this is just the first step. This is a passion of mine. I have so many passionate panelists, so many passionate attendees. This is something that is in my personal life. I told the panelists, my new husband has been diagnosed with ADHD. It's a lot for me. You got anxiety and ADHD. It's a lot in our household. So this is something that I want to continue to move here in our industry, move at ICF as well. And I see that some people have connected with me on LinkedIn. If this is something that you want to continue to partner with me on, please do so. I already have Dana and I have Jeff and I have Elaine and Katrina. If you'd like to join us as well, feel free to join me as well in our movement as we're doing this as well. If there's any type of accommodations, any recommendations you have for our credentialing team, please let me know so I can get the information out there to them. I want to give a special thanks to Isabel, who has been phenomenal. When I came to her with this idea to do this, she said, give me everything I need. I will make it happen for you. Thank you to Lisa, who has also been helping us with Facebook Live as well. And thank you to the entire ICF family and team for helping us to put this together for International Coaching Week. Thank you all so much. And I'll pass it to Isabel for any closing remarks or thoughts.
Thank you all very, very much, Lakeisha. Thank you for this wonderful discussion. Thank you all the panelists. Thanks, Lisa, my colleague as well, for running the Facebook Live. And please make sure to celebrate with us ICW, the big worldwide celebration of coaching and its impact. And it starts on the 16th down to the 22nd. There are more than 700 events in more than 23 languages available for you to sign up. It's all majority are free of charge, so really enjoy. And if you wish to contribute or do any other workshop on this topic, you can also do that as RCF members. You can also post and promote any workshop events, demo, pro bono session. Anything is good to celebrate coaching and to highlight your talent in your local community and as well worldwide. So we hope to see many of you back, and thank you so much. Have a great evening or morning or wherever you are in the world, and see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thanks everybody for being here. And
Thank you.
thank you again,
you.
ICF, for hosting this event. It was really important.
Thank you.
Yeah.